scholar at the University of Alabama at Birmingham, where I study Streptococcus pneumoniae. And the reason that we have this panel this week is because we're talking about disparities in STEM education. And that is the foundation of a lot of things that we'll be talking about this week, particularly in the field of microbiology. And so I would like to introduce our panelists for today. First of all, we have Dr. Elaine Vanterpool. She's the chair and professor of biological sciences at Oakwood University. Then we have Dr. Jonna Frierson. She's the assistant dean of graduate and postdoctoral diversity and inclusion at Duke University School of Medicine. We have Dr. Jeffrey Handy. He's the professor at Morehouse College and the director of science training and faculty for Mark, Rise, and McNair programs. Now we also have Ms. Tina Taylor. She's the founder and CEO of Heritage STEM Camps Foundation and the co-founder of Core 3 Innovations and Capital. And last but certainly not least, we have Ron McMillan. He's currently a third-year molecular biology and genetics grad student at the University of Delaware. So to all my panelists, welcome. I'm excited to see your lovely faces again. Oh, I see smiles from everybody, so I'm excited. And so we had a great introduction to Black in Microbiology Week by Dr. Montgomery about an hour ago. And with that, I just want to talk about, STEM disparities. And the first question I have to the panel is, can you just share with us how your educational experience has influenced your passion and your involvement in STEM education?
I can get started. Thanks for having me. So I think for me, this is a great question because of my experience as a Black woman in the field, specifically virology, it really changed my career trajectory. So through my experiences of being one of few or many times the only person of color, especially Black person, throughout my graduate training especially, I think that was the case through most of my schooling, but especially I noticed it at graduate level. It just begged the question for me of why. I just wanted to understand why. It was in great contradiction to my personal experiences outside of academia and outside the lab, where I saw many people that were talented, intelligent, passionate, and then you go into these lab and research spaces and you see that there's no one else there that looks like you, really. So, so for me, those experiences and those questions of why and what the barriers are and what I could do to address those barriers are why I ended up transitioning away from the bench into a career to truly focus on advocacy and diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Yes, maybe I can go next. I agree 100% with what was said. I am from New York originally, and I'm from immigrants. My parents are from Jamaica, Black and Indian. A lot of times I didn't feel like I belong. But let me say what made me actually want to do STEM. I went to school. Yeah, it was, New York is diverse. I had a mixture of professors, but there was this one professor I had in 5th grade. She was Black. She was the only Black science teacher that we had. And the way how she made you feel as a minority, I said, I want to be like her. She was really, really good. So to fast forward to translate that, she actually sparked my liking for STEM, even though I liked STEM, but I never thought I would go down the route of STEM. So now, as I matriculated, I went to an HBCU school. I went to Oakwood University for college. And that was an amazing experience. And then I went to a predominantly white graduate program, which, there were things that you experience. But I had to come back to the HBCU. Because the same experience that woman gave me, I wanted to make sure I gave that to others, because that is so important to really get them to wanting to be in STEM. And it is a success. And we'll talk about that, I guess, a little bit later on this evening.
So I would say I would echo both. My degree in engineering, I went to a majority and a minority school, North Carolina A&T. So if there's any Aggies.
You had to put that in there, y'all.
I know, I had to. I'm sorry. I'm so proud. And here's the thing. The reason why I'm so proud is because starting out, back in the late 80s for me, it was doctor, lawyer, engineer. And it was particularly going to a majority white school. And I decided to go to an HBCU. That changed my life. I got to learn so much about just our culture, how smart we are, but that was also the only breeding ground for so many excellent African Americans that's going out into the corporate space. And so it actually helped prepare me once I spent my 20 years in the corporate space. It increased my intellectual curiosity. I got to see a lot of people like me, because once you step into that corporate space, it's very different. You don't see a lot of you. And so that made me appreciate going to an HBCU. But from a STEM perspective, it gave me all the tools, not practicing as an engineer, but also as a business leader. So going into the corporate environment, they were looking for engineers because we know how to get so many pieces of information and put it together to design solutions. So they were constantly looking for innovators. And I didn't see enough of us around the table, but yet I came from an HBCU. So that launched me after retiring to build my boarding school in South Africa, focused on STEM with girls, ultimately having a lot of STEM programs that we have launched throughout the US for free to make sure that people had access and that I would be able to pour back from what I had inherited.
So Tina brings up a lot of good points, but I'm going to allow Dr. Haney and Ron to answer the question if they would like. Okay, Dr. Handy is shaking his head. Yes, of course, he wants to answer the question.
I definitely want to join in on this. I might be a little bit selfish in the reason why I'm passionate about STEM education. And when I say that, I mean, it's partially because that's the place that allows me to feel like I'm working most closely in my purpose. You know, I had been in, training environments before I got any kind of actual job. And one was at, well, I won't mention the places, but both of the places where I did my postdoctoral trainings and some of my doctoral work were PWI environments. And I mean, I guess I don't have to tell you, you got to be some kind of super sleuth to identify or find Black PIs working in the research space. I mean, they're few and far between. And the truth is, except I didn't see any in those spaces when I was training. And, I had always thought that I wanted to be an investigator at a research one kind of environment. And I really did think that. But the more time I spent training in that environment, and I spent 12 years training in that environment, the more I noticed that if I were there, I would spend most of my time not working with the population that I care the most about. I would be public, and maybe there would be some scientific accolades and whatnot there. And that would have been fulfilling for me, but I really discovered, to be honest, when I came back to Morehouse College and started doing what I was doing and training undergraduates in my laboratory, that was really the reason. I mean, I could do my science and inspire and train many more African Americans to be prepared to work in the STEM space than I would ever do in a Research One environment. And of course, that seeing all of that inspires me to fight for more opportunities for those young students, and to, feel a little bit like a radical in that we should be also fighting to break the bottleneck that keeps us out of the tier one spaces as faculty.
Wow, I'm hearing a lot of words like, you're saying gatekeeping basically, which is something that we rarely talk about. But our keynote speaker today, she talked a lot about gatekeeping and grit and resilience. And so, Ron, do you have any last thoughts about, you know, how has your educational experience influenced you to be passionate about STEM education? And, you know, why do you think it's important?
So I feel like growing up, I kind of always had somewhat of a passion in STEM, but I feel like where it really expanded was when I got to my HBCU environment down at NC Central.
I love that place.
And the Eagles out there, let's go ahead and put that out there, Eagle Pride. But
I love that.
so yeah, it was really amplified when I got down there, because I graduated high school not on the best of terms grade wise, but what the HBCU environment really did for me was really help me grow and mature into really like the potential that I had within the whole time. So like having that kind of experience and having that close kind of mentorship with somebody who really pushed me to get where I am now, it kind of fueled kind of like this commitment and level of pride to like my level of work that I'm doing right now as a graduate student in the PWI at University of Delaware. So graduating from the HBCU for both my bachelor's and my master's, and seeing the lack of presence of people that look like me in the workplace, and also even in like, you know, currently in the academic field, it's definitely fueling like that energy to give back and create more or inspire more who look like me, if they have that aspiration. Because when I'm around here, you know, in my neighborhoods, or when I'm back home, you know, I definitely get a lot of praise, and so it feels good. I feel the need to give back, and I'm definitely committed to giving that kind of mentorship to an upcoming scientist if they're interested. So that's really what STEM has done for me, and especially, you know, being a Black male in microbiology.
So it's very interesting that you guys have very similar stories. So I think when we come into academia, we know that we're not very visible and we're not there in large spaces, but it's very interesting that we have these tangible elements that we all can identify with, right? So, I mean, coming from Raleigh, North Carolina, I heavily identify with Elaine, her saying that, you know, when I was in middle school, I was doing camps at North Carolina State University, and I saw my first Black doctor when I was in like 5th or 6th grade, and I was like, oh, you know, you can be something other than a pediatrician to be a Black doctor. And it's just those things in terms of introduction that kind of fuels you in terms of, okay, well, we need representation, we need mentorship, we need experiences. And so with that, let's kind of talk about the systemic and institutional factors that play in either promoting us or hindering us from seeing this representation that we have in academia. So what I mean by that, are there programs or are there resources that help us? So I can say from my point of view, for K-12, right? So from my point of view, a lot of universities did have camps like NC State. They did have camps where they, in Project or InfoTap, where they invested the resources to have Black scholars talk about photonics and physics and math and medicine. And then as you go on to HBCUs, where I went to North Carolina Central, I was a member of the MARC program, right? Where I got to do research. And then I got to do a RU program at Duke. And so going into grad school where I got T32s or the IMSD program. So what kind of things that are there within academia to promote us, or even K-12 spaces to promote us to be visible and continue along the pathway to become those visible spaces? And then also, what are the things that are hindering that we should remove, or the barriers that we should remove?
I guess I can talk to that one to start off. Well, one, just like you, Nanisha, I went to Oakwood, and one thing about Oakwood, there's two greatness. I don't want to be biased, towards my HBCU, but there is no place like HBCUs. And also, in addition to that, Oakwood, among some other HBCUs, fit under a UNCF school. Okay. So at Oakwood, our students, because it's a UNCF school, they can apply to a lot of colleges and programs. So when I was at Oakwood, I came from a very poor background. Government cheese, that's what I lived on, so to afford college, that was a lot of money, right? So UNCF really did help me. UNCF also provided opportunities like summer research. And I too was a part of the MARC program my senior year at Oakwood. So these type of programs do shape you. And it was the president of the UNCF at the time, because I wasn't planning to go directly into a PhD program. And he spoke to me, he said, no, you need to do that. So those type of programs, HBCUs and UNCF schools have so much support for Black and minorities. Also, I'm not going to take up too much time, but, as a part of my class, and Nanisha, you're my postdoc in my lab. So, you keep hearing me talk about service learning. I've had a passion to go back to all the way down to pre-K and use my students to help be an influence in the classroom, to help innovate. They do science experiments. And what's crazy, this year in the freshman class, those kids that I taught when I first came to Oakwood, they're in pre-K. And to see that they're in STEM right now because of me, they said it's because of what I did at that young age. And there was a camp that I did where some kids came and I did, let's see what's on your hand. And they grew bacteria from what was on their hand. This one young lady told me last week, she said, do you remember me? I said, that's a long time ago. She said, well, it's because of that is the reason why I want to do science. So it's having these programs, having the exposure is really good to start this off for young folks, but definitely HBCUs all the way, 100%.
I would give a slightly different angle because I'm not technically in academia, although I have had a boarding school, and we're doing a lot of STEM camps. For me, when I was growing up, I didn't have a lot of access, nor did I know about a lot of the programs. So if I was in the rural part, so I was in the Eastern North Carolina. I think the only thing we had was the Upward Bound, but not anything from a science standpoint. So, when I went into college in, the early 90s, actually 1990, it was just purely what my parents saw in me. And so they wanted to make sure that they continued to push me. That led me to, going to an HBCU, and it's interesting, we keep talking about HBCU, but that really changed how I just looked at science. And the fact that, at A&T, we're in the building, Ronald E McNair, first Black astronaut. How can you not feel a propensity of making sure that, one, you dig within yourself and you achieve, but also what I see now in launching a lot of the STEM programs in North Carolina from South Africa. So I live in Johannesburg, South Africa, and I live here in North Carolina. There's such an insatiable appetite for learning, investing in their kids. It's so insatiable, but yet I don't see enough, especially in some of our communities where oppression has been rampant. And so I find that there's much more effort that I have to do to talk to the parents to make sure that they come to my programs and try to compare what I offer to a lot of the white programs. And I make sure I pour more because I know what's going to be expected. And so I offer everything for free. You need to understand not just the basics around STEM, but how STEM is used, understand the leadership around it, understand the financial components around it. So we try to make sure that we give a holistic component versus just going in and understanding a tool or widget, because we want to make sure we prepare you for what's to come and not just to be smart, because I inherently believe as soon as we come out the womb, we are brilliant. Now, how do we guide and direct them?
And so that's a very interesting segue that I kind of want to say. So we're talking a lot about HBCUs right now, but I know Jonna has a different perspective because she didn't go to HBCU, and that is fine too. We do have HBCU pride here, but also not all students are able to go to a HBCU or choose or elect to. And so Jonna probably has a different perspective because we all know that we have greatness within us, right? And so we can get that at a HBCU. And then how do we get it at a PWI? Like, how do we make sure that happens at a PWI, Jonna?
Yeah, I mean, I have so much respect and admiration for all of the HBCU alum here. And I myself did not have that experience, but had a really great education. And I would say for me, because I was in environments that were not always diverse, the key for me was having strong mentors. So I think the components and the factors that aided in my success were similar. It just might have been more difficult. You know, I had to really, really be proactive about finding people and reaching out and find those resources because they weren't always readily apparent. So I think for me, and part of why I find my purpose in standing in this particular environment, in the PWI environment, is because I know that you do have students, many students from various backgrounds that do find themselves at these types of institutions and might be disoriented or might need support or might be looking for someone that they can go to as a confidant and an advocate. And so I felt because of my own experience, I felt really drawn to kind of sitting in that space. And not only that, but to be able to make strong partnerships and relationships with the minority serving institutions and be able to talk to my colleagues and partners at my own institutions that I've worked at to reinforce the importance, to be able to advocate for the importance and the significance of minority serving institutions and HBCUs. So to be able to play on that end as well from an institutional partnership standpoint. So I think you have to have people at different parts of the system and at different places have different places at the table in order to make it work efficiently.
So I think that's a really good point to bring up. And I would like to kind of ask Dr. Handy about this. So you're at Morehouse College and, you know, right across the street is Spelman, you have Emory around there, you have Georgia Tech. And I mean, so we're talking a lot about mentorship inadvertently in the past couple of comments that we've been talking about. So how can you kind of touch on the aspect of how important mentorship is, and not only mentorship just within your college, but also shared mentorship around the Atlanta area?
Yeah, so you know, I wish that I had been so wise as Jonna was or has been during my own matriculation in graduate school. Again, especially not in graduate school, but beyond. You know, again, my doctorate is from an HBCU, but beyond that, my training has been in PWI environments. And what we see is that culturally, while the research training might actually be excellent, the mentorship to socialize Black postdocs and Black graduate students is not as strong as it should be. I'm not going to, you know, try to blame anyone, but I can tell you that my experience is that it's just not necessarily as strong. And so where a student can connect with a good infrastructure of support, whether that's other graduate students, other postdocs, or just other students in whichever environment of minority students of color, whatnot, and build a sort of a community of support, and have that community of support be more than just present in that moment, but sort of capable of building a legacy of support where lessons learned can be passed down as generations come and go. is a fantastic, in my opinion, way to increase persistence. I'm reading in the Q&A and listening to the conversation at the same time, and the Q&A sort of asks these questions as well. And so where you may be in a PWI environment, your colleagues around of color may be part of a good network of support. Do not be afraid to contact leaders, scientific leaders, business, perhaps leaders, wherever you aspire to be. Do not be afraid to contact those folks and begin a mentoring relationship. I don't know that there's anything more important. I mean, scientific acumen is clearly the base skill, but the appropriate connections and appropriate mentorship and learning how to navigate the spaces where you want to go is just as essential as having the scientific acumen.
Can I add to that really quickly? Really quick?
Of course.
All right, so my graduate program, I was at a predominantly, white institution. And, piggybacking off the question and what was just said, if there's a diversity office at your school, you can actually, if there's not a club or organization for Black support or minority support, you can do it. What actually got me through was, once again, having mentors. You seek out those that, have your best interest. But there was a Black support organization called the HBCU. I went to Loma Linda University in California, and that organization really helped, right? So if you're one of the few, feel free to go to your diversity office and talk to them to start a program like that. If it's not, you can start it amongst yourself. You don't need permission to do it. And, you can be the catalyst of change for those in the future to help them out. I just wanted to say that.
And so when I quickly want to do this is kind of an activity for you guys. If you had one word or one thing to say to give anyone advice, whether it be faculty to faculty, entrepreneur to another scientist, or another academic colleague to another, what's one thing we can do to improve or make the state of STEM better for BIPOC individuals? Do we want to start? Lane, you want to start?
I can start, yes.
Just one word.
Yes. Mentor junior faculty. That's 3 words. Mentor junior faculty.
Okay. I will take that and I will compress that into one, and I will allow that. Tina, what's your one word that you think would vastly help improve the state of STEM education? And this could be from your point of view as an entrepreneur, or as a person that does a lot of STEM camps.
One word. I would say it's intellectual curiosity.
That's very interesting. And I think that fuels a lot of, which will be really important to the grants that, us as PIs, we think about. If we're just naturally curious and we want to figure out things. And I think that's just one of the key things that we need to do. Okay, what about you, Ron?
I think I'm gonna say character. I think
that's a good word.
Yeah, I think that character is a big aspect that kind of gets overlooked when a lot of people are thinking about like STEM. And I think with us being some leaders within the Black community, I think that our character needs to be the most intact when we're out here in these environments where there's not many of us. And I think that's the strength that we have to kind of like relay to the youth. So
that's an amazing word. I love the word character, because I feel like a lot of us, we talk to our family about our science, and we're typically the point of reference for decoding a lot of things that are coming at them, especially in this time of like COVID, or when it comes to like cancer, or when it comes to, epidemics and pandemics and things like that. So our character, both as, a family member and our character as a scientist, is something that we both need to look at. Oh, that's a phenomenal. I love that word. I love that word, Ron. Okay, Dr. Hanny, what's your word? What word do you think?
I would have given several of the words that I've already heard, but passion is probably the one that I'll say in addition to what we've already heard, passion. And I actually try to model that probably in every space I go, but especially in front of students, the more passionate you are about whatever it is you do, the more likely you are to enjoy it, despite how tough it gets. I'm not getting paid for this right now, but honestly, I enjoy being in these spaces, and I'm passionate about what we're talking about. And so I freely give of my time in this space to support those outcomes.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, I think passion definitely fuels you when you have to spend those late nights in lab, when something doesn't work. It's passion. Actually in between passion and intellectual curiosity, right? So even though it did fail. Like, why did it fail? I'm curious, and I wonder why did it, and I'm gonna be persistent in trying to chase the answer because I'm passionate about it. But in addition to that, also do passion projects that may be outside of science, right? What fuels you for the soul? So those two things can be balanced. And so for coming, last but not least, Dr. Frierson, what is your word for how we can make everything better?
I'm last, so I get to break the rule. So I couldn't think of just one word. I honestly thought fix the system and uplift the individuals. That's what I think we need to do to make it better. And we really have to shift our philosophy about how we're trying to accomplish the goal of creating a more diverse and equitable and inclusive environment. And so, yeah, I would say fix the system and uplift the individuals.
So that's an interesting statement that you made, because when we were doing the pre-panel discussion about this, one of the things that came up was, do we need, as scholars, to assimilate and adapt to the current system that we have now? And if not, what should we be doing to change up the system?
I'll add a few more comments to that. And this is really closely related to what Veranda was saying in her keynote, which was, again, it was really, really good.
It was amazing.
But I think it's, so fixing the system, uplifting individuals. And can you repeat the question? I lost my train of thought for a second. The question was?
So, we talked about in our prep for this panel, we talked about how should we as scholars or people in academia, should we assimilate to the environment right now, or should we try to break the mold and have the environment adapt to us?
Right. Okay. So I think it's a both and to me. I think Veranda mentioned understanding the system, and I'm very much along the same vein that I think you have to understand the system, and a lot of people refer to it as the hidden curriculum. I think that's part of access to resources and information that certain people are privy to and certain populations are not privy to. So I think that's part of the work that we have to try to do, is to reveal that system and reveal that curriculum, while at the same time we're working to change the system itself so that that curriculum is not the norm. So some of the norms within the culture and the climate are actually changing at the same time.
I can jump in if that's okay. I agree.
Of course, we are just talking. We're having a discussion. Feel free to jump in when you feel like it.
Okay, so I just want to say the system just seems like it's in a steady state, whereas, there's a lot of resistance to change just generally in the academia. And one thing I've seen through the years is that our students are not stationary. Every year, our generation changes. And so we have to make sure, sometimes it may take us standing up against what is stationed at our schools to make sure that we are adapting to our young people, what our young people need. And, there's resistance. And, being on the, on the younger end, sometimes it seems like we're battling some of those that have stayed in the system a lot longer. Sometimes they'll look at us like, you don't know what you're talking about. I've been teaching, or I've been in academia much longer than you, but you have to realize you have to adapt, and school, the institutions, society have to adapt to our students, because our young people are brilliant. And if we don't go towards what they are manifesting or what they're showing, they're going to lose confidence. So we have to make sure that we go against stationary. We should always excel. And that's always been my mission. And I'm going to make sure that my students excel and get what they deserve. Just my opinion.
Yeah, I would piggyback on both the comments that's been made. And again, although I'm not technically in academia, but a product, in building my boarding school, one of the things that I noticed, and even before then, we were the first at the corporation where I was, I made sure we pulled money back from the city, because every corporation, they have a line item and charitable time and donation that you're given to your community. And in Cleveland, where you have a lot of African Americans, they have access and don't have access. I said, you know what? I don't know where the money is going. So we built a STEM school on our headquarter campus. So talking about breaking the mold, who wanted to do that? I said, I want to make sure people that look like me, that one, they had access to me, because I was the only African American female that ever reported to the CEO in 125 years of that business. So I wanted to make sure 26 schools that was in Cuyahoga County, that they had access to me, as well as all of the other leaders. So they can hear the conversation. Now they can understand, well, what questions should I ask? So that's when I talk about intellectual curiosity, you have to be curious in order to understand what the possibilities are, where you should opt in, where you should start looking at different options, and not just be myopically focused on what someone has told you that is the best thing for you to do.
Oh my goodness, that's a phenomenal, oh my goodness, that's such a great gem that you dropped there, because I think a lot of times in academia, and it's getting better, I think, we're always used to walking this straight path, and because that's what we're told, right? And I think along the way, you just encounter experiences that shape, oh, I'm interested in this passion and this intellectual curiosity that you have to look at other things. And I think you just have to be ready and open and available to take those opportunities when and if they come.
You have to, the world is changing. I mean, we didn't know about cryptocurrency, and we didn't know about AI, and AI is impacting African Americans more than you realize. If we're not opting in to those types of fields that have changed over the past, not even 5 years, 10 years, then we're going to be left out, but yet we're going to be the victims of what's being created.
And I think a lot of us, we need to, and I think that goes back to what we discussed too. We were talking about strategy, how at each level of your education or even your career experience, there's some kind of strategy that you have to adapt or have to, enforce on yourself to say, okay, this is what I need to get done to get to the next step, or this is what I need to be open to get to the next step. And I think that's just an excellent point to bring up that sometimes we don't think about. We just go along with the flow of, okay, this is just obviously the next step. Some people go to high school and they're like, college is just obviously the next step. Grad school is obviously the next step, but they're not thinking at a deeper level of, okay, what actually do I want from each of these next steps that I'm actually taking? So with that, I'm gonna actually go into the Q&As. We do have a couple of questions. And if you are listening to this broadcast live, feel free to ask questions in the Q&A, and I will direct them to our panelists. So the first question is specifically to the HBCU alumni and faculty on the panel. Do you agree that the lack of Black excellence in STEM in major research universities demonstrate a need for not just Black students, but all students to see and experience Black excellence?
Yes, if you're done reading, I will jump in
Well,
feet first.
that's the first part of the question. I'll leave it at that part for the first part.
So my answer to that would be absolutely, without question, yes. There is such ignorance about just how excellent Black people can be. Not just Black people, but across the diaspora, excellence is possible. And there are enclaves or nooks and crannies and where people are not aware of it. And regularly, those are the nooks and crannies where people think that excellence is concentrated. And they have not had an experience with an African-American or other person of color at all, much less from which to draw on an experience. And so these people in those places, maybe intentionally, maybe subconsciously, perpetuate the exclusion of Black people because they don't have any basis on which to
compare it to.
Predict competence and excellence. Is what I'm thinking. Yeah. So I cannot, in strong enough terms, endorse the need for Black excellence to be present in every space where people are curious and asking questions. I think it's a barrier against, not just against the success of communities of colors, but if there is a national imperative, then to realizing the national imperative. There's an analysis recently showing that many of the NIH grants that are written by Black scientists, Black investigators, don't get funded because they are community-based. And my question would be, look at the disparities that have been produced by not paying attention to community-based work. The fact that we are asking questions in what they call the basic way has absolutely left certain communities out of benefiting from discoveries. It's not that we're inferior or different. It's just that you haven't paid attention to any of the factors that are present in those communities.
Very, very
big
good.
enough questions. So we need. I'll stop.
That is on the money. I feel like you can do a mic drop on that. Did anybody else have any other comments for that particular question? Sorry, maybe y'all should still answer, but that was a great, I think, answer. But she also goes on to say, so she's in Southern California, where the Black population at the universities are very scarce. And she's saying that's what she's becoming accustomed to, very much like Dr. Henney has talked about. And so she said, how can someone like me, a PhD, serve as a catalyst to create Black communities at universities with low numbers of Black students that struggle with student retention, Black student retention? Ooh, that's a loaded question.
Well, that goes back to what I was saying. You need a support network. And I know it's hard. I've had friends that have, where maybe there was a handful of those that look like them at the school. And so it's really important for you to reach out. I mean, we said it earlier, reach out to those that do look like you on campus, to get mentors and to form a group and work with the diversity office if there's one. If there's not one, you go ahead and you do it, because it makes a difference. Studies show that if you're mentally and emotionally being supported, whether it's students supporting each other, that makes a big impact, right? Especially when it comes to STEM. So I would go and make sure that you reach out and you start something. You can be a change maker for those that come behind you, as well as those that are there now. So I'll just leave it like that.
And also, I would recommend, look at some of the businesses and corporations around you. When you look at the trajectory of African-American women or women of color entrepreneurs, you don't have to stay within the academic environment. You can also expand and grow your mentorship, and that becomes a pipeline. Either way, you know, whether those businesses, they need to hire you know, some of the faculty to work on some research projects, or you know, just having that community from a different perspective. So go outside the box.
Always, always. So our next question.
Let me cap my 2 cents in.
Okay, Ryan, come on with it. Come on with it.
just to add a sprinkle of my thoughts on it, I would say it's definitely like that question seemed like it was like an extremely ambitious kind of like goal for one person. And so what I would say is to like just like take advantage of the climate of like social media and like really like more or less be an example out there on those platforms, because you never know. Like, I mean, you can make a YouTube video and just represent in a way that just inspires people in the vicinity of you in a way that you never thought. And so, you know, these study videos, these people who are just doing like, you know, a lot of interesting things on Instagram, Facebook, etc. On the campus. I mean, if that's in your fancy, that can inspire somebody to look like you to come out to your university, which may just begin a domino effect for outreach. So that's my sprinkle.
That's actually a great sprinkle, because I mean, so I think as you know, the younger generation, we do a lot of things over social media. We're doing Zoom and we're broadcasting live over. Okay, I'm showing my age, which is still very young. I think it's called Periscope, but we're doing it across Periscope. And you know, we have a YouTube channel, a Twitter, and it's just very informative and influential how good social media is in influencing people and getting information to them, right? So that's a very, very good point, Ryan. Thank you for that. Dropping gems yourself. Yes, I love to see it. So the next question that we have is from a graduate student, and they only have a PWI experience, educational experience. And so they're saying that if we have Black STEM students who aren't at an HBCU, what is the single greatest tool that can be used to promote persistence?
You said a student at an HBCU? What was
No, this student is at a PWI, but they've only had PWI experiences. And so they have Black STEM students who are not HBCU, so they're in the PWI space. What is the single greatest tool that they can use or to help them promote persistence in their education?
So I think I can't. Sorry, that's my child. I think the single greatest tool goes back to the thing that can make you important in any environment, which is seeking those resources. I really think it goes back to seeking resources and being strategic about who you're placing in your sphere of influence. So making sure that you're connected to the right people, the right community of support, especially, I would say that is big. I mean, if you're in an environment where you feel like you're not represented and you don't really belong, for whether it's explicit or implicitly, you feel like that, I think having that community of support and that place where you feel like you can be yourself and connect with like-minded people is really, really important. I know for me, I found several different outlets along the way, whether it be gospel choir in college or Black Girls Run in grad school. So I was able to find different sources of support to help reinforce. And then also having really strong mentors. My graduate advisor was an extremely strong advocate for me, not only my development as a scientist, but holistically as a person. So I was really strategic in who I chose to do my dissertation work with. So I think you just have to be really selective and strategic about who you surround yourself with.
Definitely. That is definitely a good point. So the next question says, in regards to resources and examples of diversity and recruitment and outreach programs, how can we actually navigate and ask Black scientists to be involved or encourage them to divert time away from their own careers to talk about like mentorship and things like that?
I guess I can answer that one. So yes, we are very, very busy, but a lot of us, because of experiences that we've had, no matter how busy we are, we actually do want to reach out. We do want to help those that are younger. And so you just need to go and ask them, give them the opportunity. A lot of times they don't know where to go to help. And even if they're busy, they can allot an hour a month, an hour a week, whatever it is. Every little bit counts and makes a large impact. So I would just say, just go and ask. They want to do it. They will make the time. If they can't, they can't. But a lot of them want to. Just go and ask them.
So I think that's a great answer to that question. And the other question in the Q&A talks about, what can you do to help the students see a future for themselves in STEM careers? And I think that's mostly access and showing them that there are people that look like them that are successful within the field or even other fields that have a STEM foundation. That helps them see themselves, because I think Ron can talk about it too, because he's a graduate student still going through the process. I recently graduated from and got my degree. It really does help when you see someone in position of something that you're expected, or that's the goal that you want to accomplish. And it's like, well, if they did it, then I can do it too. I always thought that of my undergraduate research mentor, Dr. Williams. I would be like, oh, he's a Black man at a HBCU studying Syria. Okay, if he can study in Syria at an HBCU and go to, NC State and do his postdoc at Emory, I can do all those things too and have an impact on STEM education. So I think that's the biggest thing. That's how you help students see a future, by showing them what's already there.
Can I add to that, Nanisha, too? So I think that when I saw that question, it just reminded me of self-efficacy. What is self-efficacy, and how do we promote students' confidence in their ability to do something? In this case, we're talking about completing a PhD or doing research. So what you're talking about, the role models and seeing something, being able to visualize people that look like yourself, that's one form of it. But I think what that faculty member and many faculty can do is become more familiar with different sources. Number one, what self-efficacy is, and how in their mentoring relationships they can build self-efficacy in the students that they're working with, whether that be through the role models or mastery experience, whether that be through paying attention to how someone's reacting, responding emotionally and psychologically to the work that they're doing, or social persuasion, like you mentioned. So there's different sources. There's great articles out there about how you can do that. So I think that's another way that they can tangibly focus on building that in the students that they're working with.
That's a good point. And so we have 1, 2, 3, 4. We have 4 more questions. Let's try to answer these in 4 minutes. So actually, this is a really good question. So it says, how can we prevent the mentoring of minority students from falling solely on minority faculty? Does Dr. Hindi have an answer for that?
I don't know that I do.
Okay.
I have ideas and opinions on it, but I don't know that I have an answer for it.
That is very fair.
So all of us, I think, that are, sort of leading, or maybe more experienced in this space, sort of have a responsibility to encourage our colleagues in the spaces where we work to become part of the support mechanism to train and enable the people who come behind us. And so that's part of, I think, the responsibility of having moved into the space where you're no longer a trainee, but now a leader of some sort, making sure that you connect in spaces where other people are, and demanding, but gently demanding that, you know, you take part in the training and enabling of students who come behind us. That's sort of the best I have for us right now.
Very, very true. Okay, so we have a comment and a question from an HBCU alum. He says, I've always been inspired by how much HBCUs do with relatively fewer resources. Very true. The positive impact of HBCUs in the Black community is undeniable, and we're seeing more and more due to lack. We're seeing more and more closed due to lack of funding. This will evidently be a negative impact on Black students, especially those interested in STEM fields. So what are some things people listening can do to help to advocate for better funding for HBCUs? Phenomenal question. I love that.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, so one of the things that that I actually do, Core 3 Innovations, we focus on getting grant funding, federal grant funding for HBCUs. When you look at how much money actually go into a lot of the different universities, and this is just a small portion, and I know we don't have a lot of time, there's about $10.5 billion annually that go out for research. HBCUs get only $3.2 million out of about 100 HBCUs.
Wow.
And that's because of N1. So if you look at Stanford, MIT, they get anywhere from $1 billion to $2 to $3 billion annually. So they are able to invest, but you don't have that stopgap. So we're starting to look at that and to bring the Department of Treasury, Department of Commerce into those spaces with the HBCUs and pairing a lot of the HBCUs together so they can go after the $1 billion federal grant, so they can invest in their communities as well as get additional faculty, all of the things that the PWIs have.
So with that, we are actually at 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock for East Coast people. If you did not get your question answered, I would highly recommend you go and add Black in Micro and ask your question on Twitter. And you can get even more, they laughing, the panel is laughing at me, referencing Black Twitter. But anyway, so I would highly recommend that you ask your same question through the Black in Micro hashtag or at, and have other people within the community answer your questions, because they're very good questions. We just didn't have the time to answer them right now. So feel free to do that, and that will be amazing because we can start the chatter online, and you never know how many conversations will open up and opportunities will open up regarding your questions. So with that, I first of all would like to thank the panelists. Thank you so much for taking the time out to do this panel. I think we discussed a lot of good things regarding the disparities in STEM and, you know, where do we go from here? What things we need to think about as we strategically go through our journey, and how we can give back and how we can mentor, right? So we all have experiences of mentoring and how we've been mentoring and how do we pass that along. So with that, I want to say thank you to our panelists, and I also want to say thanks to the Black in Microbiology organization team on their work on this project. Once again, thanks to all of our donors. And of course, thank you to the audience for sticking with us, enjoying our conversation, hopefully, and for your time, attention, and your questions. And with that, we're gonna see you guys tomorrow. Tomorrow is Virology Day. So today was STEM education or disparities in STEM education. Tomorrow is virology day. And we will see Kishana, we'll see Kizzy tomorrow. We'll see Chelsea tomorrow. We'll see a lot of different people talking about the different viruses that impact all of us. So stay tuned for tomorrow. Hit us up on Twitter, hashtag my mentor story. Talk about how you got into micro, and we will see you guys tomorrow.